The Clippers are clippering. The Knicks can't have nice things. And at what point do we stop giving a damn about the Warriors, Lakers, and Suns? Next on The Dime.
You are now listening to The Dime with Josh and Quab, your go-to NBA podcast. Subscribe on Apple, follow on Spotify, and be sure to hit up the YouTube channel for video content. And now your hosts, Josh and Quab.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to The Dime. It's been a while, but I'm back, and I got a special guest with me. If you want, you can follow The Dime on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I'm missing one, YouTube at The Dime NBA. I'm Josh Rodriguez at Josh_Rodriguez_. Quab is not here today, but don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we have the host of Scott's Selections and a co-host on SGPN's NBA Gambling Podcast. Everybody, please welcome to The Dime for the first time, Scott Reichel. What's up, man? How's it going? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, happy to be here. Nothing like talking some blatant at NBA.
Give everybody your background, all that good stuff, what you got going on so they can follow you.
Yeah, so from New York, I'm a Nets fan, so I don't talk about it, but either way, I follow basketball. Not a fun time for me right now, but still. I was a Nets fan before they got the super team that failed miserably, so I have been committed for a long time with the core, but that has not worked out. Either way, though, appreciate it. I need all the help I can get right now. But still, point is, been busy a lot with the sports betting sphere. So I do a bunch of free picks on YouTube. I Scott Selections on the Winners and Whiners YouTube page. A bunch of podcasts at the SGPN, the Sports Game Podcast Network. I co-host the NBA show, co-host the MLB show, the NFL show. I run the tennis show. A lot of gambling content, all free. Should mention that, all free. Find that on my Twitter at Reichel Radio.
All right, there you go, Scott. Just so you know, my co-host Quab is actually a Nets fan too. So you you're just like a natural co-host for this show. I think the universe picked you for me. That's what it feels like right now.
I don't know if that's kind of a coincidence or not, but how does it feel that the only two Nets fans are left on the earth? Isn't that a little weird?
I've been searching far and wide for Nets fans, especially when they left Jersey. I have a bunch of Jersey friends who abandoned the team once they left New Jersey for Brooklyn. So I've searched far and wide. I did move to Los Angeles, couldn't find him anywhere. Every time I go back to New York, can't find him, but there you are. I don't know how I found you, but I'm glad I did. And now you're hosting on The Dime for an episode. So congratulations. All right, Scott, you ready to get into some headlines?
Sure, let's do it.
I'm going to read off a couple of headlines. Scott's going to let me know whether it's real or fake news. I'll chime in as well. Here we go. First headline. The post-All-Star break Clippers are the real Clippers. Scott, is this fake or real news?
I'm going to say it's real news. Of course, not everything's 100%, but I'm a bit lower on the Clippers than I'm assuming most people are right now. People are still trying to expect the Clippers to figure it out in the playoffs. I was never really fully buying into the hype. It's mostly James Harden. Just going to start somewhere. We know Kawhi's been getting injured more frequently. I was shocked his body held up this long. I think we all were. But with him getting injured a bit more, he had the back spasms issue last week, where he couldn't even sit on the bench. He had to go pretty much into the locker room from that point forward. That's always a concern, but it's Harden. I mean, looking at the shooting numbers, they've fallen off a cliff, and we feel like we've seen this from Harden in the last couple of years. Usually it's playoff-related. Maybe that's going to pop up in the playoffs again, but it just looks like Harden is not creating separation. It looks like they keep trying to revert heavily into an isolation-style offense, and if Harden is not going to be able to exploit pick-and-roll mismatches and get to the spots he needs to get at, the entire offense falls apart. And we saw that in the last game where he was basically over for the first three quarters. I think this is closer to the real Clippers than whatever we got for the month and a half this team was on fire. So it's not 100% real news, but I think it's closer to real news than fake news. This team might be one and done in the playoffs. It would not shock me if this team fully imploded and lost in the first round. What do you think is more likely for this team right now? First round loss, Western Conference Finals appearance.
Honestly, first round loss, I'm with you there, man. Because especially if they get the 6th seed, if they fall out into the play-in and you have to face, OKC or Denver in their first round, I'm with you, man. I think they do lose in the first round. I'm going to say also this is real news, but in the sense when you go to fact check it, it says mostly true. It doesn't factcheck.org doesn't say it's completely true. It's just mostly true. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head with Harden. I think you're right about that, where he's just kind of falling off a cliff a little bit, but I think it has more to do with the offense itself going ISO heavy. I do think they should be running more pick and roll. I know Zubac has been hurt a little bit, and it kind of has taken away from that. Kawhi was hitting jump shots, particularly at an incredible rate to start the season, and he's gotten hurt and he hasn't been as efficient as he used to be. I think Ty Lue needs to be a little more creative on the offensive end, and then rebounding and their size have always been a problem too. And I feel like when you go against teams that are going to beat you up inside and these bigger teams in the West, that's going to come back to bite you in the ass, so to say, when you start playing more competitive basketball and when the refs are not calling the fouls that they used to call. We'll talk about that later. So I think it's a mixture of a lot of things with the Clippers, but I do think that this is more of what they are than what they were before when they're just playing out of their minds. Moving on to headline number 2. The Mavs win versus the Nuggets prove they are a Western Conference threat. Scott, is this real or fake news?
I think this is fake news. This stinks of fake news for me.
Thank you. I was worried you're going to be a Mavs truther. You're not.
I don't really understand how this was the takeaway that social media decided to run with, because first of all, the game was very competitive. It really shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
Dallas was dominating for about the first 40 minutes and change, for 45 minutes or so, and then they blew a double-digit lead in crunch time. And then Kyrie, well, first of all, Luka hits the phenomenal three-pointer, I get that. Jamal Murray bricks a wide-open mid-range jumper. He's wide open from like 15 feet. He bricks it. And then Kyrie hits whatever the hell that was. Phenomenal shot by Kyrie. That's a phenomenal shot. They still blew a double-digit lead down the stretch. That game should not have come down to the wire. They probably should not have been trailing in that situation in the final minute before getting bailed out by star power and just overall star talent. But if we're talking about coaches that I don't like, I know Ty Lue, we said was kind of we're in the middle on. I'm not a Jason Kidd guy. I experienced it as a Nets fan, but shout out to him for spilling the drink on himself to get a free timeout. But still, point is, Jason Kidd, I don't think is a great coach, and people give him some credit for trying to manage Kyrie and Luka together, I guess, but it really hasn't worked out that well based on the records and based on the overall talent. I don't think Dallas is that great of a team because they can't guard anybody. I'm not going to suddenly pick them to be serious contenders in the West because they won a home game where Jokic was awful for most of the game. He was terrible. Murray wasn't great either. So your two star players that you're against have really underwhelming games. And you still need a game-winning buzzer beater at home? Like, I don't really know why people think because they won one game, suddenly they're going to go toe-to-toe with Denver in a 7-game series. I don't get it. Dallas is an objectively bad defensive team. Luka is a phenomenal player, but he's one of the worst defensive players in the league. It is what it is. He's just not a good defensive player.
Yeah.
And if your star player is going to pack it in defensively on a regular basis, and Kyrie's not a great defensive player either, I'm not picking you to make a deep run in the playoffs. So as far as I'm concerned, good win, but fake news.
100% fake news on this one as well. I'm with you too, man. And the whole Jay Kidd thing too. I watched some Mavericks basketball. I actually caught the back end in this game, so I didn't see the whole thing. But every time I watch Mavericks basketball, it's the same thing. It's either pick and roll at the top of Luka, or it's just some type of isolation with Kyrie. There's no imagination with the offense whatsoever. And a lot of people talk about Kyrie and Luka, but you have to have some type of sets. You have to have some type of movement. You have to make other players threats, in the half court in order to make Kyrie and Luka thrive in the playoffs as well. So yeah, they're individually great and they can probably win you a game or two in the series if they're hot, but there's still like no imagination on the offensive end, which is supposed to be their strength to begin with. So you get into a 7-game series with a defensive team like the Nuggets, you like the T-Wolves. I just don't know how strategically Jason Kidd is going to pull 4 out of 7 against teams like that. And then you hit it on the head too, man. Defensively, they have bad habits. And if you have bad habits throughout the regular season defensively, I don't trust you in the playoffs, period, because I think you have to develop good habits during the regular season, and they're just not a good defensive basketball team. So I think people get really excited when they see Luka go off or they see Kyrie go off and Kyrie does something amazing, and then it gets put in your head that like, oh my God, well, if he could do this today, imagine what they could do in the playoffs, and they just kind of fall in love with a narrative in their head because they've seen something amazing, and I feel like NBA Twitter always falls for that, man. But yeah, this is 100% fake news. I'm with you as well. How do you feel about Kyrie, man? Ex-Next fan. Just curious. Not trying to start something here.
I don't have any issues with him personally because it was a weird situation with COVID and with the vaccine and how that was kind of just some unpredictable circumstances. He didn't want to get vaccinated. That's his choice. I'm not going to get mad at him for doing that, whatever. It was unfortunate. But of course, at the end of the day, if Giannis doesn't, stand where he's standing, they might win a title. I'm not going to blame Kyrie for getting injured in the playoffs. Like, I feel like Nets fans are going to be a little bit bitter towards Kyrie because of how the whole thing unraveled. In reality, I just think it was pretty unlucky. I'm not going to go out of my way
Yeah.
and say it's Kyrie's fault, this happened and this happened, whatever. At the end of the day, I'm fine with Kyrie. I got no issues. Of course, it was an absolute headache at the time, but nobody could have
Yeah.
foreseen a full pandemic taking place, and nobody knew what was going to happen with COVID. It was a weird situation for everybody. So for Kyrie personally, I got no issues with him. Having said that, with the Mavericks, at least to talk about that duo with Luka, I don't think the duo works that well because Luka needs the ball in his hands all the time.
Always, yeah.
He doesn't do anything off ball, and you could argue Kyrie doesn't really do much off ball either. So if the whole point that you said before, the lack of imagination and the lack of creativity with Jason Kidd's offense, if Luka's going to dribble the ball for 15 seconds out of the shot clock, what is Kyrie doing? Is he just standing in the corner? Like, I feel like that's the point that I have an issue with this duo. I
Yeah.
don't want to compare it to the DeJounte and Trae Young combo, but the argument is if they're both ball-heavy, ball-dominant guys, and of course there's only one basketball, I don't think they're going to work well together. And yes, both of them are incredibly skilled individually, but they need the ball. And I don't see anybody really trying to make the argument that Luka is suddenly going to play off ball for Kyrie or Kyrie's going to play off ball for Luka. I don't see it. So Kyrie, very talented player. There have been really not many distractions this year. Knock on wood for Dallas, but still, it's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the pairing.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the pairing either. I think Kyrie is a little better off ball than people give him credit for. But again, if off ball means I'm going to be off ball in a Luka Doncic pick and roll with Derek Lively, like what are you really doing? You know what I mean? It maybe you're a kick option, maybe. But even the person rotating in help, the third man rotating in help, is you're leaving someone open in the corner. That's usually someone else besides Kyrie. So it's like he's not going to get the ball, period, even if he's off ball. So yeah, you're right, man. I don't like the pairing. I don't like the Mavericks. I think they were playing well. We had them in our top 10 the last time we did power rankings, just out of respect for what they were doing. But I don't think they were a threat at all.
I think this team can potentially upset one team in the first round. They're not going to the Western Conference Finals. They're not good enough.
All right, headline number 3. The league has solved Tyrese Haliburton. Real or fake news?
It's the word solved that I feel like is such an absolute term that I just can't go with. I'm going to say fake news, but I do think the hype surrounding Haliburton, I don't want to say it was overblown, but I do think he was starting to be put in conversations he shouldn't be in. I think that's one way to put it. I think Haliburton's a very good point guard. The issue with him is pretty simple. The man never gets to the foul line. Ever.
Yeah.
So if he's going to be pretty much a three-point or a jump shooting specific or reliant guard, you're going to have shooting slumps. And to go through the numbers, by the way, you know Haliburton has been in the league for 4 years. He joined the league in 2020, 2021. You know he's never attempted more than 3.6 free throws per game in an entire season?
I did not know that. Jeez.
He's never attempted 4 free throws per game. He doesn't get to the line. So if we're talking about today's NBA, I know that they changed the officiating a bit, but even before that, we saw them calling fouls on everything. Everybody was going to the line all the time. And Haliburton's not even averaging 4 free throws a game. So when your shooting numbers, particularly from 3, have absolutely fallen off a cliff, and you're not doing a good job of actually manufacturing contact or flopping, however you want to call it, you're not manipulating the refs into giving you calls, you have problems because you have to be a bucket getter if you're going to score. Now, we know the vision is nuts. The basketball IQ is obviously incredible. But the main issue with this game, he really does not handle contact well, and he tends to shy away from it. So if you want to be physical with him, he has more of a finesse-based game. So solving, I'm going to say is fake news, but he's going to have to make some adjustments. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and I think based off of what you just said, I'm going to say it's real news, but not like in the sense where it's like, oh, he's fugazi, he's a fraud. I think he can make adjustments. I think he can get better, but I think the league has kind of picked up, on how to guard him. Listen to these stats. The last few games: 1 for 9 for 3, 1 for 9 for 3, 1 for 6, 2 for 6, 1 for 6, 2 for 7, 3 for 10, 0 for 6, 0 for 6, 3 for 8, 1 for 6, 1 for 5 from 3-point range. That is insane. That is disgusting, man. And I always see people like kind of criticize his jump shot and how it looks, and aesthetically it doesn't like it's the most proper jump shot. I don't know how much that kind of plays into it. But I do wonder, like, what is he going to add to his bag that's going to make him be more efficient, like towards the end of the year, or maybe even next year. You're right. He does have to get to the line. You do have to get into the paint. You do have to find a way to create for others, moving forward. I know the pick and roll has worked and they run a lot, and he's a great open court passer and an open court playmaker, but I feel like he needs to add a little more to his game, step back mid-range, driving to the hoop, things of that nature, because we talk about bag a lot on Twitter. His bag is really not that deep once he gets inside the three-point line. I think that needs to change. I think it can change, but I think for now, this version of him, I think the NBA has figured out. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think he can get better. It doesn't mean that I don't think he will get better, but I think for now, it's up to him to make the adjustments, because I do think people have figured him out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get it. I think we're kind of on the same page where we think he needs to improve in
Yeah, I think so
areas,
too.
but he's not solved per se. Any team would love to have him. We're not saying that he's, of course, peaked already.
Absolutely.
I recognize how good
Right.
he is, but when you're not getting to the line, it means you're also not really getting to the rim that much. And if that's going to be the case,
Right.
and you kind of turn yourself into a ball dominant perimeter shooter, you're going to have
Right.
problems when the entire opposing team knows that if you have to go downhill, you're probably kicking it out. Because we've seen Haliburton
Right.
shy away from contact for most of his career. So I like Haliburton a
Right.
lot. Very good point guard. But I have to at least acknowledge, if he goes through these shooting slumps, he really doesn't have a plan B on how to manufacture points.
All right. I want to talk about the Western Conference playoff race. I mean, a lot of people want to talk Lakers, Warriors. Those are like the two teams that like drive content on YouTube. And I want to throw the Suns in there as well. These teams right now, they're all on the outside looking in. They're going to be playing teams. And these are teams, I guess, depending on who you are, that had high expectations. Before we get started on each team, at what point do we ignore star power or potential of a team and just go like, you know what, this is what they are? Like, despite the fact that the Suns have Durant, Beal, and Booker, maybe this is just what they are. Or do you take it the opposite way, where you're like, as long as Durant, Booker, and Beal are on the team, the potential's always there. The ceiling's always high. Like, where do you, like, how do you, like, what's your litmus test with all that, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask.
For me, I'm more pessimistic in that area. I think that having a
Okay.
star player can increase a team's ceiling, but you still need a good
Yeah.
foundation. The Suns, for example, do not have a good foundation at all. We're going to talk about them in a second.
Right.
But if your overall roster is so heavily concentrated on a couple of star players and you mailed in the rest of the team, you're going to lose. It's just how it goes. Unless, especially in today's
Yeah.
NBA, you could get away with that maybe a decade ago because LeBron carried multiple franchises to the NBA Finals for about a decade straight. Like it's been done
Yeah.
before. Then again, LeBron also did have Kyrie, but they had a lot of league minimum guys trying to fill out the rest of the roster. But LeBron's a once in a generation player, so I can't even use
Yeah.
that as a comp. The point is, I think looking at the overall star power argument, they can win you a couple of extra games here or there. But even if you're looking at a phenomenal run, a title run, if you want to go with Jokic, if you want to go with Giannis, a bunch of other, players recently who went on series runs where they carried their teams were still really good. It's not like I'm suddenly going to tell you that Giannis's team was not good at all. Drew Holiday was still in his prime then. We know he's one of the better on-ball defenders in modern NBA history at this point. Middleton was good enough where Giannis got injured in the Atlanta series and he was able to carry. But the point is they had talent. They had guys at other positions who were above league average. And I feel like the argument you can make is that a star power can raise the ceiling of a good team and turn them into a great team. But you still have to
Yeah.
at least have a good team. And a lot of these star power teams, the Suns, for example, you want to go through a couple others, maybe the Lakers, for example, because this year they're probably going to be a play-in team. The overall roster is just not good enough. And star power is only going to get you so far. We saw that with the Suns last year, where they did steal 2 games against Denver because Booker had 2 of the greatest shooting performances in playoff history in back-to-back games to steal 2 games. They weren't close to winning that series. But a star power
Right.
or two can give you a win or two, but you need a good roster. So to answer your question, I'm more pessimistic. I don't think stars can put the team on their back like it's a March Madness tournament in a single elimination. But I do think that they can help you potentially get past a team that you are close to in terms of talent.
What do you think the problem was with the Lakers this year? And are you surprised that they didn't make any moves at the deadline? Because there was some rumblings that LeBron was upset. They made the big move last year. They're the Lakers, for crying out loud, so they're always going to make a move. What do you make of that? Do you think they're just kind of punting on the season, or do you think they actually believe that this is the same team that made the Western Conference Finals last year? They could do it again.
I'm going to start off with the trade deadline because that involves the actual
Yeah.
roster makeup. I don't really know what moves they could have done because you're hearing a lot of people make the argument of, well, the Lakers should have done this. What? Levine was a guy most people didn't want anyway, and he got injured, so that wasn't even an option. I don't know what the market is for DeJounte. I mean, I don't know what the market is for him because Atlanta kept him. So clearly Atlanta didn't like the actual asking price. The truth is, the main issue, the reason why this kind of went off the rails was the Westbrook trade because they devoted assets to trying to acquire, at the time, a star player. There's serious quotes around the word star, but you get the point. They tried to make a move that was going to position them to have a big 2.5 at the time. We'll call it that. And it backfired dramatically. And then they sold Westbrook for pennies on the dollar because nobody wanted him and they couldn't do anything. So I feel like the main argument for the Lakers at this point, a lot of people are mad that they didn't do anything at the deadline. My counterpoint, what were they supposed to do? Who's the one player that they could have acquired that would make all of this better? And if there was a guy that was available to fix this, could the Lakers afford him? Probably not with the assets they have. So I don't know what the Lakers were supposed to do. I think Pelinka looked at the roster and said to himself, what are we even doing anymore? We're just investing more capital into a sunk cost. I think he decided we're better off either waiting the season out, seeing what happens, or just potentially realizing the writing's on the wall. So I actually was not that shocked the Lakers didn't make a move because I don't think they're good enough anyway. And to answer your question on what went wrong, this team's old. You know, LeBron's old. I can't believe what LeBron's still doing at his age. But I think the main problem you have with the Lakers is nuts.
Insane.
It's nuts.
It makes me feel so insecure about myself and my age. I'm younger than LeBron, and this motherfucker is just dunking on everybody, scoring 35 points a game in an NBA season. I'm here just like struggling to get up after I do 10 minutes of working out. It's embarrassing, but sorry.
Yeah, the point is, I think one thing I got to talk about to shift some of the blame, I'm not going to blame it on coaching. I think Darvin Ham's a terrible basketball coach. I think he's a terrible basketball coach. This team has bigger problems. You can put a good coach on this team. The roster's not very good. It just is what it is. Now, if I asked you right now, who do you think the best player on the team has been this season? Who would you pick?
LeBron.
That's a problem, isn't it?
I would say so. Yeah, he's not supposed to be your best player when he's 40 years old. It should
That's
be
an
Anthony
indictment on
Davis.
Anthony
This
Davis.
should be Anthony Davis.
That's my problem.
I agree.
I think Anthony Davis is just not consistent enough to be a superstar top 10 player in the league night in, night out. And based on how the roster is currently positioned, they need him to be. So a big reason why I think the Lakers have been struggling is that AD just has not been the world beater that they were hoping he would be. And we saw that in the playoffs last year. He had a couple of games, mostly the Memphis series, where you're just looking at him going, I don't know what the hell you're supposed to do against this guy. He's punting every shot. He's walking into 30 and 12 every night. Jaren Jackson had nothing he could possibly do when he won Defensive Player of the Year. And then you get into the series down the road, and AD's getting destroyed by Jokic, and you had the running joke of the Jekyll and Hyde Anthony Davis. Very good game, very bad game. Very good game, very bad game. It just alternated. There's no consistency with Anthony Davis. And with the current roster and how, I'd say, reliant they are on star power, LeBron doing everything he can at 40 is admirable, but it's not realistic if you want to actually have a shot to do any damage in the playoffs. They need Anthony Davis to play like Anthony Davis on a night in, night out basis. And for whatever reason, not just against Sabonis, he can't do it. I don't know what it is. It seems like he has a couple of games against some teams like the Warriors, for example. I know he got injured recently. We'll see what happens there. Where AD can show you, maybe in a game or two, oh, he's still got it. You look up, he's got 35 and 20 and 5 blocks, and you're like, all right, if he plays like this, they're going to dominate. He doesn't play like that enough. So to answer the main question that you asked with the problem with the Lakers, I'm not going to shift all the blame on Anthony Davis. But for the current roster and for what the expectations were going into the season, with LeBron, who's 40 years old, you should be the best player on the team, and you're not. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a great analysis, man. And I especially think that was the plan, too, once they signed Anthony Davis, and especially after their championship run, you're thinking, okay, this is going to be AD's team from here on out. It's been, 3 years since they won the championship now?
Mm-hmm.
And it just hasn't happened. And he's fantastic defensively. I think that's always the case with Anthony Davis. He's always fantastic defensively, but offensively, he's so confusing. He's just so I don't understand why it's so on and off with him. Austin Reeves got off to a slow start as well this year. I think he's played better. But yeah, the Lakers, to me, it's interesting how last year, again, almost with the same roster, they made the Western Conference Finals. And this year, it's just kind of what they were in the first half of last year. And I think a lot of it is Darvin Ham, though. I'm not going to lie. I do think if they had a different coach, they would be a better team. I'm not sure they would be Western Conference contenders. But Darvin Ham is just not a good coach at all. I think his rotations are silly. I think he's, like, earlier in the year, he was very locked and loaded on Cam Reddish for whatever reason. And I don't say that as a Knicks fan who's jaded about Cam Reddish, but Cam Reddish should not be getting major minutes in the way that he was getting. Same with Taurean Prince, who was struggling throughout the year. I think Rui deserves more time in certain situations as well. I just think Darvin Ham just does not have a good pulse on the team. I don't think the team likes him. LeBron has made some comments in the media where it seems like he's unhappy with the coach as well. I'm surprised he's still around. I'll be surprised if he's around next year. I think he's going to get fired at the end of the year, especially if they don't even make it out of the play-in.
Once again, I think Darvin Ham is a terrible basketball coach. I just want to get that on the record.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I think most of the issues with this team is based on roster construction and the lack of Anthony Davis consistently dominating the way that he should, at least the way that people expect him to. So yes, I think that they would be a better team with a competent basketball coach. How much better?
Yeah.
What are they, like a 6 seed, a 7 seed? That's still a problem.
Yeah.
So
No, you're right. So
that's how I look at it.
You do a gambling podcast. Is it worth throwing a little bit of scratch on them to win the Western Conference?
Absolutely not.
Save your money, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely not.
Don't do it.
No, not at all. No.
Don't do it.
I feel like because even if, let's just say, you think the Lakers can find a way to make a somewhat deep run.
Right.
First of all, Denver owns them. They never beat Denver.
Right.
When the hell do they ever beat Denver? Like, that's a problem. You're not going to win a 7-game series against Denver. And two, because of LeBron and AD and them probably being in the play-in, how are you ever going to get a good price on the Lakers?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Horrible pricing. Let's move on to the Warriors. I want to talk about the Warriors. They lost to the Knicks tonight. This is a team that, again, like I can't really seem to figure out. Every time I think I'm ready to bury them, they go on a win streak. And every time they go on a win streak, and I'm like, all right, well, maybe they're turning it around. They start to lose again. Clay's is coming off the bench. Dre's in and out of the lineup for whatever reasons. Steph was hurt for a little bit. He comes back. What's your take on the Warriors, man? Because they still have that core of Steph, Dre, and Clay, even though it's kind of different now. They have younger players in the rotation. Again, another team where fans have a problem with the coaching. Do you think that that time, like where the Warriors are contenders, is that past? Or is that something where it's like, no, we still should take this team seriously. They can still figure this out.
I think it passed last year.
Okay.
Just watching that Lakers series unfold. Yeah. I just did not think they were good enough. And DiVincenzo walked. I'm sure you are thrilled DiVincenzo walked.
Happy.
He's been really good for your team. But still, the point is that watching this Warriors team last year and watching Clay just be atrocious for an entire season.
Yeah.
And them just running it back. I feel like there needs to be a conversation about loyalty. And I don't even mean just teams being showing no loyalty at all. I mean the flaw on the other side of the spectrum of being too loyal. There's no way Clay should have come back this year. There's no way. After what happened in the playoffs last year, the fact that he's still on this team is insane to me. Because he was brutal the entire playoffs. And they brought him back and they're like, oh no, it's fine. I don't know how you thought this was going to be fine. Like, am I wrong? I mean, we watched it. We saw those final games against the Lakers.
Yeah, he was awful. And honestly, I think I don't want to say single-handedly lost in one game, but there was one game in LA where he shot them out of a possession with like a minute left. And I've always had a problem with his shot selection. I've always had a problem with Clay's mindset, thinking he's better than he is. He was just awful. Defensively, he's not the same. I'm with you, though. Yeah, for sure.
And even the Kings series, they won because Curry dropped 50 in Game 7. Clay didn't really do anything at the back end of that series. But still, I've been low on Golden State for a while. They decided that their ace in the hole was to acquire post-prime Chris Paul. Sure, I guess. Like that was the move you went for to try to salvage the whole thing. I'm not saying Jordan Poole would have been the answer either. I still can't stand Jordan Poole, so I understand why Golden State cut ties. But this team's just too old.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at the loyalty argument. Did Draymond overstay his welcome here? Maybe. You could argue that he should have been potentially traded. I don't even mean the sideshow stuff with the punching of Nurkic and all that stuff. We know he's going to come with baggage. He can't score. Defensively, Draymond is still a very solid player, but you have to at least acknowledge the fact that he's lost a step or two. He can't shoot. That's been an issue for a long time. And even Steph's taken a step back. Rightfully so. He's older and he has a lot of mileage on him, but even his three-point numbers have kind of fallen off a cliff for the last couple of weeks. He was good against the Knicks for the first couple quarters tonight, and then he kind of struggled in the fourth quarter. You look at the roster, what do you like about this team? It just feels like they're trying to cling to the glory days for too long, and they peaked a couple years ago, if not like 7 years ago, and they've been trying to rekindle the glory days. It's like a band that keeps doing reunion tours. At some point, you got to realize you got to move on to a side project. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that too. And also, you asked what do I like about this team. The funny part is like it's the young players that excite me. Like Jonathan Kuminga, who Warriors fans were like begging Steve Kerr to give him a bigger role and playing in more minutes and in crunch time situations. And even Moses Moody, who can barely get off the bench some games. You know, I know Paz is getting playing time and Jackson Davis is getting playing time as well, but I like a lot of the young players for the Warriors, and I feel like Steve Kerr is just giving them inconsistent minutes, doesn't really know what kind of role he wants for them. And one of the things that I look for teams like success in the playoffs and teams that I believe in are defined roles. And I feel like during their dynasty run, like you knew everybody's role. Everybody knew what they were going to do. Everyone knew what they were good at. Like you knew what you're getting from every single person who was in that rotation. Now with the Warriors, it's like game to game. I don't think Steve Kerr even knows what he wants to do. And players are confused outside of Steph Curry. Even Klay Thompson's, you know, he's moved to the bench. Draymond's really in the lineup. And it's just kind of like a team where you don't really know what you're going to get from game to game. They're so unstable. And there's so much instability that they're hard to trust. And it's a weird thing to say about a team that I trusted so much. And even like their split action game doesn't really work as much as it used to. I mean, the split action used to be almost impossible to guard when you're watching it. Now it just kind of seems like it's a mess. I make this joke all the time. It seems like sometimes I feel like the Warriors play like they're on cocaine. It's just like they're running around and there's cutting, but it doesn't really seem like it's with a purpose. They're just a different team. I think age has something to do with it, but I also think the two timelines thing is for real. And I do think, you know, you have players like Kuminga and Moody who can demand bigger roles, but Kerr's just kind of not giving it to them. And then sometimes he does. And it's just one confusing process for the whole team. That's how I look at the Warriors, at least.
It feels like this year should have been more of a transition year.
Yeah.
But they're so stubborn and they're so disillusioned by the past that they think that the glory days are going to keep living on. They're not.
No,
I think the
not.
Lakers series kind of exposed them last year,
Yeah.
and they decided, "Oh no, we'll figure it out." Like,
Yeah.
no, you're not. Like,
you
it's
run
over.
it back with Looney, and get a big guy to replace Looney, or get a big guy who can protect the rim. And then, I think also part of it was Wiggins not starting off the season, playing well. I think they were relying on him to be the Andrew Wiggins the year that they won the championship, so that has something to do with it as well. But I'm shocked they didn't make a move, at the deadline too. So
was that a fluke? The Wiggins year?
I don't think it was, man. I mean, Wiggins, even before that, he averaged 20 a game. I know he was inconsistent, but I think he has the talent there. So for me, I'm kind of shocked that he's fallen off as much as he did. I'm not going to lie. I mean, he's always been inconsistent in Minnesota. He came to Golden State and he had his moments, but he's definitely better than he's shown in my mind. That's how I feel, at least.
I think he's better than he's shown this year, but I have to at least point out that I think it was pretty fluky how well he played in the playoffs in particular in that title run. Because in the NBA Finals, whatever you think about Andrew Wiggins, former number one pick, endless talent, you could argue he never reached it, whatever. He was the second best player in NBA Finals, winning team. He was the second best player. I don't think any of us ever thought Andrew Wiggins would ever be good enough to be the second best player in NBA Finals winning team.
Yeah,
is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's fair as well. But I do think when you look at that offense at the time, he wasn't supposed to be the second best player. He just so happened to be the second best player, if that makes any sense.
That's kind of my point, is that he had a moment where everything kind of clicked for
Yeah.
a month or two, or especially in the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
Wiggins, I feel like, set the bar so high in a somewhat unrealistic fashion where he played so well that people thought that was going to become the norm.
Yeah.
I thought it was an outlier. That's
Okay.
kind of how I look at it. People were hoping that Wiggins would be able to turn the clock back and to channel whatever the hell happened to him for about 2 weeks in that Celtics series. And I just don't think that's who he is. I
Yeah,
think
I
that's
think that's
kind of how
fair.
it goes.
I mean, I was thinking, I remember thinking, I was one of those people. And for me, it was just kind of like, well, he was a number one in Minnesota. Maybe it was too much for him. Maybe he's more of a 2 or 3. And then, he goes to Golden State and he has number one pick potential. And then he shows what he can do with that potential. And you think to yourself, well, he just has to be the third or fourth option. Yeah, he can absolutely do this. I mean, he's been the one option in Minnesota. Like, he's perfectly capable of doing this. And I think that's where my mind always falls back to, where it's like, this was someone who was drafted to be a franchise player. This is someone who did average 20 a game in Minnesota. This is someone who has been the first option. This is somebody who is used to having the ball in his hands, who can go to the hoop and create for himself. So that's where my mind goes. And I do think, again, I don't think he's as bad as he's shown this year. I think maybe it's more towards what he was in that Celtics series and in the finals and in those playoffs. Maybe not to that level, but at least close to it, man. I mean, I think it's fair to expect at least close to what he gave you.
I think it's a mindset thing because the one thing that jumped off the page in that NBA Finals series was the rebounding. Wiggins was a monster on the boards of that entire series. The issue I've had with Wiggins for a long time, and I've kind of grouped him with Harrison Barnes in the past, because I think that there is I'd say a passive mindset with both players. If you remember Harrison Barnes in North Carolina, I saw a lot of similarities when I watched him play. Great athlete. He could put up 40 in any given night. And yet you look up and he has 10 points in the final 2 minutes of the second half. And you're wondering, why have you done nothing the entire game? And that's kind of lingered for both Barnes and for Wiggins in their respective careers, where the talent is undeniable. It was definitely there, kind of pivoting more to Wiggins, because we know what the upside was. He was the number one pick. They were calling him, what was it, Maple Jordan at the time? He was Canadian Jordan at the time. So there was a certain hope that he was going to be this elite NBA player. And yet you watch him play, and he looks mentally checked out half the time.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest issue I have with Wiggins. It's just a mental thing. He's just not wired the way that I would want a star player to be wired.
All right, so is it smart to throw some scratch on the Warriors winning the West? Yes or no?
I think you got a better chance of betting on them to miss the playoffs.
Oh, okay. There we go.
They're going to be a play-in team. You got to remember, if they're the 9 or the 10... or I'll check right now. I don't have it in front of me. If you end up taking the Warriors to miss, a reminder, if they're the 9 or the 10, they have to win 2 play-in games.
Yeah.
Not 1. They have to win 2. I think they're going to miss the playoffs. I don't think this team's very good.
I'm with you, too. We had a Dime Superlative episode previewing the second half, and they were my team that I picked to fall off a cliff. So we're in agreement there. All right. Finally, the Phoenix Suns. We talked about them earlier. Why are they so bad in the fourth quarter? It doesn't make sense to me. You have Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant. Although they don't really play much together, you do have 3 shot creators, shot makers. Grayson Allen's having a phenomenal year, by the way. I feel bad for Grayson Allen. Grayson Allen's balling out in Phoenix, and just no one's ever going to notice because they're completely mediocre this year. But what do you think it is? Like, why are they struggling so much in the fourth?
Well, first of all, for Grayson Allen, he's been great. He found the time to be very efficient, and he taught Filipkowski how to trip people. So he's really been busy for the last couple of weeks. But still,
the legacy lives on.
Point is, Duke legacy lives on. Still, for me, it's just about isolation basketball. We've talked about the Mavericks, and we've talked about some other teams, the Clippers, for example. Some teams just have to run isolation because all their star players, all they know how to do is isolation. Booker wants the ball. Durant wants the ball. Beal wants the ball. Are they going to do anything off ball? Probably not much. Maybe Booker a little bit, not much. The point is, it just feels like the Suns go stagnant offensively because everybody is going, oh, it's my turn. I got a one-on-one. I'm Kevin Durant. I'm Bradley Beal. I'm Devin Booker. This guy can't guard me. And they take a bunch of bad shots. Not to mention the fact that they're just not a very good defensive team in the stretch of games. But offensively, Durant's had a brutal week. I'm not even going to talk about Durant for a second. I've never been a Beal guy.
Same.
I feel like Beal was always an empty calorie stat guy, where he would put up monster numbers on Washington and the team would suck. That was kind of the story of his career. Westbrook showed up, bunch of triple doubles. They were fun. They made the playoffs, actually. They got through the play-in, and they got smacked. I believe it was by Philly in the first round in like 5 in that year. But still, I've never been a Beal guy. He's had injuries. He's never healthy. They paid him a ton of money because they acquired the contract from the Wizards when they traded for him. To answer the fourth quarter questions, none of their guys do anything off ball, and all of their guys are on-ball scorers.
Yeah.
And when you rely on contested fadeaway jumpers, which is what Beal likes to do, what Booker likes to do. Booker goes to the rim a bit more than those other two, but still, it's a lot of contested shots and a lot of really ugly possessions that lack ball movement. So my main issue is shot selection and a lack of a proper offensive system late in games.
Yeah, I think, they say that basketball now is positionless, and I do think that's true to an extent, but I think if there's a team that ever needed a point guard, it would be Phoenix. Just someone to kind of get everybody organized and kind of, run sets and plays off of. I'm not saying that should have been Chris Paul. I know people automatically think that I'm like, oh, they should have never traded Chris Paul. I've gotten to that debate before. But just someone who can just organize an offense, man, who can get these guys into spots, maybe coming off curls or just whatever, some type of motion where you can give someone the basketball and you can trust to kind of make a play for somebody else. I feel like they're missing that because
Tyus Jones
would have been perfect. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Just something like that. It's one of those things where I think you have isolation basketball, which I do think is needed in the playoffs. Just because you're isoing doesn't mean that it's bad. A lot of people think that it's just kind of like, oh, iso basketball, just everything's stagnant, which it can be. That is true. But if you have players who can go iso, it's a good thing. The problem is you can't do it all the freaking time. And pull-up jumper, no matter who it is probably one of the more lower percentage shots that you can take, right? You rather an open three, you rather
especially
a
mid-range.
Yeah, or going to the hoop. So, and last year, like you said, Devin Booker and Kevin Durant had games against the Nuggets where they were just phenomenal pull-up jumpers, and they still lost that in 6. So for me, it's a roster issue too, where it's like you might have the stars, but you don't have anyone to get you organized. You don't have anybody to run any type of offense. It's just kind of like a free-for-all every single time. And Frank Vogel's a defensive coach, and they don't really have much imagination on the offense because they can't. And then they have defensive lapses like they did against Milwaukee the other night, where they're just letting Bobby Portis go off on them. They're not really even rotating. They're missing assignments. They're losing their guys. They just don't seem to be in sync. They don't seem to be a team. Out of everybody who I watched this year, they just seem to be a group of individuals who just roll the ball on the court and just see what the hell happens. Like, there's just no type of continuity whatsoever. Out of all 3 teams that we're talking about right now, I mean, I know that you're living in the past with the Warriors, and then same thing with the Lakers and what they were last year, but the Suns are the ones that I'm most down on because I just don't trust them to show up to do anything. They don't do anything consistently. There's nothing they can hang their hat on except for, hey, at times, one of our guys can be unstoppable at the moment, but that's it.
Yeah, I'm going to remind you that Beal is currently in the second year of a $251 million contract. Just going to throw that out there because I think the main issue this team ran into was new owner syndrome, where they got Ishbia, who decided, you know what, I got to make a splash. I got to do something. No, you don't. Beal is not going to help you. Your team has no roster flexibility because all your actual cap space is tied up on 3 guys.
Right.
You could argue 4 if you want to throw in Nurkic, but still, they have no flexibility whatsoever. Beal's never healthy, and when he is, he's not a good defensive player. Right. And he's a ball-dominant guy who's now relegated to the 3rd option on offense. It was a marriage made in hell. It was never going to work. I've been roasting Phoenix all offseason. Their win total was in the 50s, which made me laugh. I was all over the under. That worked out very well. I was very low on this team from the get-go, and everything that I thought would be the problem with this team has been the problem because Beal has not been healthy. Yeah. Defensively, they're not very good. They have no bench. I didn't even expect Grayson Allen to be great. Grayson Allen's been phenomenal, but even with that being the case, how many guys on this roster do you actually trust in a playoff series? You have Durant, who's older, Booker. I don't trust Beal. Nurkic, I definitely don't trust defensively.
I trust,
Grayson Allen's earned my trust.
Yeah.
Do you trust Eric Gordon? I
I
mentioned
do.
maybe 3 guys you might
I
actually
trust
want.
Eric Gordon. I trust Nurk. The thing with Nurk is just like he's gonna get played off the floor. You put him in pick and roll situations.
Yeah.
You can't use him. And then Eubanks is he's not going to be useful in the playoffs whatsoever. I mean, he's somebody who tries hard, but offensively he's a zero, and defensively he's okay at best. So yeah, man, you're right.
So what do you have? You got 4 guys on your roster that you
Yeah,
actually feel decent about or good in a playoff series? That's a problem.
yeah, it is. And I'm going to ask you what I asked you about the other two teams, and I assume it's going to be the same answer. Is it worth throwing scratch at them to win the West?
No, you get
No.
better off trying to bet them to miss the playoffs.
That's
Once
what we
again.
learned today. Don't bet on these teams to win the West. Just bet on them to miss the playoffs.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that the common theme is that we were focusing on teams in this episode
Yeah.
that have drastically underachieved.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is it's not fluky. These are bad basketball teams.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to make, is that star power can only get you so far. And when your overall roster makeup is extremely flawed, and the Suns roster is extremely flawed, they
Yeah.
have serious problems for multiple years to come, as long as that Beal contract's on the books. They don't have any moves. What are they supposed to do? They got Royce O'Neal for a bunch of second-round picks. Good addition. As a Nets fan, I can tell you right now, he's not Utah Royce O'Neal. He's not the same guy. He's better than the other 3-and-D options that Phoenix had at the time. But still, no. My main point for these 3 teams, don't get distracted by the star power and the name brand recognition. These are not good basketball teams. I'm not saying it's a changing of the guard because I'm still picking Denver to win the West. But still, there are much better teams out there, much deeper teams out there that I think would give these 3 teams problems for multiple rounds. That's my point.
All right, Scott, let's end the show by going down NBA Twitter.
Did you just? I can't believe. Yes, you really tweeted that out. NBA Twitter, you are undefeated.
All right, this is NBA Twitter. I'm going to read off tweets from NBA Twitter that came down my timeline. Scott and I are going to determine whether we're going to like, retweet, or reply and explain why we are doing so. Scott, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, tweet number 1 comes from @NickTake. It's Nick Take Jake, and he says, Thibs yet again playing hurt guys when he shouldn't. Knicks have a well-documented culture of playing through injury under Thibs. The sacrifice he discusses in most of his interviews. The coach needs to be able to hold a guy back and think ahead. Sometimes Thibs rarely does this.
I got to think of how I want to respond to this because he basically killed Derrick Rose, and he's still doing this like 12 years later. So I got to think of how I want to go about this. I would probably retweet it with the caption, fitting that Josh Hart played all 48 minutes tonight. And that would be the only thing I'd post. That's how I'd end it. So I'd go something along those lines. But there you go. Shout out to Miles McBride, too.
Yeah, shout out to Miles McBride for sure. A great game. I'm going to reply to this and say, what else do you expect him to do at this point? Because the Knicks are so freaking injured that these players like Josh Hart and McBride are going to have to play big minutes. What else are you going to do? This person is mostly mad at the OG injury. So he thinks that, because OG came back and he was averaging 33 minutes a game in 3 games, that Thibs hurt him again, which I don't think is fair to say to Thibs. I do think he might have killed Derrick Rose, and I do think that maybe his teams get worn out from time to time, but I do think it's kind of unfair to blame an injury on a coach. That's a little too far for me. It's a little too far for me.
I am not going to blame him for OG. When you acquire an injury-prone player, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we know this. When you acquire OG, the upside is great when he's on the court. He's a phenomenal 3-and-D defensive player. You pair him with Josh Hart and DiVincenzo, that's a hell of a trio. But still, point is, he gets hurt all the time. So if you acquire him, and you're going to, when you acquire him, Thibodeau's not going to mess around. Thibodeau's going to play him a bunch of minutes.
Yeah.
I would blame it more on the front office than Thibodeau. What's Thibodeau supposed to do?
Yeah, I'm sure
He's
Thibodeau
gonna
got
play his
the
guys.
word that he was good. That, hey, listen, you could play him. He's not coming back until you can play him. And if I'm the front office, if I'm the Knicks organization, I know I can't clear him until I know he get played 40 minutes a game. If Tom Thibodeau's my coach. So I think he was cleared and was good to go. I just think you're right. Sometimes people just get injured, and he's someone who gets injured.
I don't even mean the re-aggravation. I mean the initial acquiring before the trade deadline.
Yeah,
you know his injury past. It's well documented. And you know that Thibodeau is probably the worst coach to play for if you are an injury-prone player.
Right.
It's not Thibodeau's fault. What's he supposed to do? Like, Thibodeau got a phenomenal 3-and-D guy that's perfect for his system.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect. The problem is he can't stay healthy. That's not Thibodeau's fault. The
Right.
problem is that even though you can argue stylistically it's a great pairing, his body is not going to be able to handle Thibodeau's overall coaching. And that's the bigger issue. That's not Thibodeau's fault. He can't do anything about it.
All right, here we go. Tweet number 2 comes from Trevor Haas at Trevor Haas, and he says that Anthony Edwards dunk is legitimately one of the best of all time. Insane.
I mean, I agree. I'm going to retweet that.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it's the best dunk of all time, but I think it's definitely up there. You can argue that his dunk on Watanabe, which I don't believe counted.
No, the Watanabe one counted.
Probably
that one was that
one did count.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that one was better.
Yeah, I do too.
There were no fans there. It was during COVID, but that was one of the most disgusting dunks I've ever seen. If I had to retweet it and the comment was the best dunk of all time, I'm just stealing Vince Carter's dunk over Frederick Weiss, and I'm just completely just posting it.
Yeah. Just a gif of that.
That's how I'm responding to that if I'm retweeting. If he said the best dunk, I'm just taking the Vince Carter Olympic dunk. But one of the best, that's a retweet. That's just correct.
Yeah, I'm going to like it. I don't know if I'm going to retweet it because I do think it's a fantastic dunk. It might be the best dunk of the year, but I do like, for instance, a Vince Carter dunk. I think it's not even his best dunk of his career. So the one on Watanabe is another one. Blake Griffin has some dunks that I think are out of this world. Gerald Green, net fan, when they were in Jersey, Gerald Green alley windmill was ridiculous. Vince Carter has some there as well. So for me, I don't have like a top 5 or top 10 in my head that I can think of. This one definitely, I think you can make a case for, but I wouldn't retweet it because I wouldn't put my name on it. I wouldn't put my stamp on it saying like this is legitimately one of the best of all time. I'll give it a like and saying, you know what? I know why you think that. I can see why you think that. Good for you. That's what I'm going with.
One of? I mean, that's a cop-out phrase. I'll retweet that.
Yeah.
When somebody's going to argue with me on that?
Yeah, we need more of like a descriptor, right? Like maybe like top 10 or top 5. So
you just say one of? Who's going to argue with me on that?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I just give it a like.
One of? Like, no. There's no qualifier there. Yeah. I'll retweet that. That's fine.
All right. And finally, from Scotch Fully Yours, he says, hearing folks talk about how great it is that the refs in the NBA are letting them play and it's more physical, so it's more fun. Did not watch the abomination of 90s NBA basketball, and it shows.
I would immediately respond by retweeting Elon Musk requesting for a dislike button because this is just a bad take. This is just a bad take. Like I feel like the argument is with regard to current basketball, you can't have it both ways. Either you want the refs to control the game and you want artificial scoring with a bunch of free throws and a free throw contest, or you want actual basketball with flow. I prefer the latter. So I like what I've seen. I like not having one team shoot 40 free throws. I know Embiid's injured. I know Trae Young's injured. But I really hate seeing these foul-baiting guys go to the line 20 times a game. It drives me nuts. So I vehemently disagree with this stance. I like the flow of the game. It has kind of taken on a playoff atmosphere to it about a month or two before the playoffs, which I'm a fan of. I like. Yeah, I'm retweeting it to Elon Musk asking for a dislike button.
I'll quote retweet it and say, nah, this is cool because it's working for my Knicks. And I genuinely think that teams like the Knicks who are physical and who are going to beat you up are benefiting from this new set of rules that the refs are going by. And also, I like the games better. I think you're right, man. I mean, there's more of a flow. There are times where I feel like, for instance, like Jalen Brunson's been hit a bunch and they haven't been called and he hasn't really gone to the line. But I like it.
He drew a flagrant tonight.
Did he? What, on the 3?
It was a landing space Zaza Pachulia penalty, but still, he drew a flagrant. That counts.
Yeah. So for me, it's like, you're going to get that. But at the same time, I would rather that than like that move where the guard just kind of like jumps into you and throws up a freaking floater. The one that Trae Young does every freaking game, 2 or 3 times a game. That's such a frustrating call. That has to be removed from the sport. I would rather that than what we've been seeing for the past few years, what these guards have been doing. So, refs are going to miss calls. It just is what it is. But I'd rather them miss the calls that they're missing now under these new set of rules, and they were making like these ticky-tack foul calls, like, because it just ruins the game. It's annoying, and I'm glad that they've made this move that they've made. I'm enjoying the game a lot more.
I also want to just point out one thing. Fans in general are pretty reactionary in every sport, where you might reflect on something more positively than you did in the moment.
Yeah.
Did anybody like the way the game was officiated for the first 4 months of the
Nobody
season?
was, man.
I
Everyone was
hated
always
it.
complaining
I
about
think
the refs.
everybody hated it.
Everybody hated
Everyone
it.
was complaining about it. Every game had 250 points in it,
Yeah.
and now they change it, and people are complaining. You got to make up your mind.
Yeah.
Either you hate the officiating because they're constantly being involved in the game, or you like it because you want to see points. But you can't suddenly retroactively look back on something that you hated and say, you know what? I love seeing each team get 40 free throw attempts. Like, no, I don't miss any of that. I've been a fan of how basketball's transpired for the last month.
Yeah,
Or a couple
I have
weeks,
to.
I should
And
say.
they, everyone was complaining, and now the league's giving us what we want, and not everybody, some people are still complaining. I mean, the fouls that Joel Embiid would get and that Trae Young would get, I mean, just ridiculous. I mean, just absurd foul calls that you're not seeing anymore, and I'm happy about that. I think it's a better game, so
You
shout out
can't
to
get
the
it
ref.
both ways. You can't have the refs be overly involved and not involved at all at the same time. I would rather have the refs not involved. If I had to pick between those two extremes, let the players play. That's how I stand.
Thanks for joining me, man. It was good. It was a good time. Appreciate you coming on. Let everybody know where they can find you again, and what you've been up to.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. I got free betting picks on pretty much, I link everything to my Twitter. But on YouTube, on the Winners and Winers page, I have a daily YouTube picks episode. So keep an eye out for that. Besides that, a bunch of co-hosting responsibilities on the Sports Game Podcast Network, SGPN. Co-host the NBA show, co-host the MLB show. 10 days away, by the way. Start of baseball season.
Nice.
9 days, technically, for opening day. So point is, you got baseball around the corner. Also doing the NFL show off season, but still, and tennis. So a bunch of podcasts, bunch of gambling for me, and maybe for some of you.
All right, there you go. If you want to follow Dime, you can on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at The Dime NBA. I'm Josh Rodriguez at Josh_Rodriguez_. Hopefully Quab will be back soon. He's at Quab AKS. We'll see you next time for another episode of The Dime.